In this video, we'll look at lens diagrams for converging lenses. Converging lenses. Now remember, converging lens will have a real focal point. So if you have a bunch of rays of light that come in from the left, they will all cross at a specific point on the right. And that specific point is what we call a focal point. So let's put F here. This is a converging lens. If you have a bunch of parallel rays, they come in, they will all converge at a focal point. So let's draw this a little bigger, maybe somewhere here where we have. So here's the lens. And now let's see, there are two. I probably want to do three, or maybe four of these. Okay, so here's the lens. And here's a central axis for this lens. So somewhere here, I'm going to draw this thing right through the middle. Yeah, it should do. And then let's say that we assign a focal point right here, maybe in blue is what I'll do. So we're going to assign a focal point here. Here's F. And of course, and then let's say that I'm going to place an object here at this location. I'm going to label this object as object A, and I want to see if the rays of light come in and they reflect off of this thing. So you're going to have a bunch of rays of light that reflect off of this. They all come in, they reflect back off of it, go towards the lens, and then somehow travel through the lens and generate an image somewhere here. And the question is, how exactly does this happen, right? You have billions of rays of light that reflect off of object A, they go through the lens, they form an image somewhere on the other side, and the question is exactly how does that happen? So let's get rid of all of these random rays of light. They all play a role, but we only need two. Actually, we just need two rays of light. And it would be helpful to assign a direction to this point. So even though this is an object, and the object is just labeled with A, let's say that we draw an arrow here, and our object is just the tip of this arrow. You'll see why we want an arrow here in a minute. So now let's consider rays of light and see how this thing works out. So you're going to have billions of rays of light in here that will reflect off of the tip of the arrow and then go towards the lens. So out of the billions of choices we have here, let's pick one where a ray of light is going to reflect off of the tip of the arrow and then travel towards the lens in such a way that it would be parallel to the central axis here. Right, so there. So here's a ray of light. It comes in maybe goes in this direction. Maybe it's coming in from here. Maybe it's coming in from here and then reflects off of the tip of the arrow and then goes like that. Right, and then what happens afterwards? Well, afterwards it's going to go through the lens, change the direction, and go through the focal point, but the focal point on the other side. So what I have to do is I have to make sure that I have, if here I have a certain distance to the focal point from the lens, then on this side I should also have the same distance. So somewhere here I'm going to have a focal point, and just make sure that these two distances here are the same. So this distance must be the same as this distance. And if on a quiz I give you F on this side, you should just make sure that when you draw F on the other side, it's the same distance, exact same distance from the lens. All right, so the ray of light reflects off of the tip of the arrow, goes towards the lens, and then refracts, and it goes through the second focal point. It just does that. There's that. So that's that. Now let's choose a second ray of light that reflects off of the tip of the arrow and this time travels through the focal point. And so it goes through the focal point towards the lens. So maybe there's a ray of light that somehow comes in like this and then reflects off of the tip of the arrow and then travels like that through the focal point, gets to the lens. All right. What will happen to this one, to this ray of light as it goes through the lens? So think about it for a second. And in the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and I'll just draw the result. It will travel out in a way that is in a direction that is parallel to the central axis. So it's just going to do this. Right, and now what we get is a point where the two rays of light have just crossed. And as it turns out, if you were to draw other rays of light, so perhaps let's do that. These two really are all that you need. So you need one ray of light that is parallel to the central axis, another ray of light that goes through the focal point. That is all you need, because you have already figured out where the information about point A ends up being delivered to. Right? Both of the rays of light reflect off of point A, and they carry some information about point A. One ray of light carries it this way, the other ray of light carries it this way, and they combine here, and they put that information together at this point, and now you have sort of some information about point A at this location. If you were to put your, well, okay, let me add something to it, since this is the first diagram we're doing. So suppose that another ray of light comes in, reflects off of this tip, the tip of the arrow, and now it goes like that. So not quite parallel to the central axis. What will it do afterwards? Well, it turns out that it will just go towards this point anyways, but like that. Let's say you have another ray of light that reflects off of point A and goes like this. So not quite through the focal point, just a little off, does that. What will it do? Well, it turns out that it will just go out and then end up going through the green point like this. And then let's draw a few more. If you had another ray of light that reflected off of point A, but this time it went like this, then that would still end up going through the green point. And then maybe do one more here, goes like that, and then goes out this way. And how many more rays of light do you have here in between the first two that we drew? Well, many of them. And all of them come together at this green point here, meaning that a lot of information about original point A is delivered to this specific spot. So we have a lot of information about point A, original point A at this specific location here. And if you were to take your eye now and put it right in this location, so let's say your eye is sitting right here. Oh, let's not use green. Let's use black. Say this is your eyeball, and you're looking at it this way here. Then all of that information about point A would be arriving at your eyeball, and you'd be able to detect information about point A. And to be more specific, you would see the image of point A. And I'm going to add something to it. Even though this is point A right here, the arrow itself would be reconstructed like this. So if I were to put point B here and point C here, then point B would end up at this location and point C would end up at this location, and I would have inverted image. All right, now I gave you a lot of information there about that. But if you were to do it in a quick fashion, then what you need is a lens. You need a central axis here. You need the two focal points. So let's put the two focal points. Here's one focal point. Here's another focal point. And then here's the object on the left-hand side. You would need to draw only two rays of light. One reflects off of the tip of the arrow, goes to the lens, and then through the focal point. The other one goes through the focal point, and then parallel to the central axis comes out like that. And now you have transferred the object to the other side, and here's the image of the original one. So on this side you would have the image, and on the other side you would have the object. Of course, in the center you have the lens. All right, here's another way you might be asked to draw rays of light for a lens. So let's say you have a lens now that sits right here. Now let me think about it, because let's just, okay, this should do. And then here's the central axis, so axis of symmetry, horizontal axis of symmetry. And let's say that you have the focal point. Let's say that the focal point is Well, let's put the object first somewhere, because it's going to help me a little. It'll help me see it better. So if I have an object here, and point A is right here, this is the tip. Point A is right here. The focal point, now I want the focal point to be, I want the object to be within a focal length. See how in the first image, the object here is outside of the focal length? Now I want the object to be inside of the focal length. So I want the focal point to be somewhere here. But let's see, if I do that, this should do. Okay, so let's say that the focal point is here. And I want to make sure that this distance here is the same as this distance here. I probably should have. Let me put it somewhere. Let me put it farther out. So let's say that the focal point is here. And then the I'm going to make sure that this distance here is the same as this distance here. And that's about right. So there's that. And now let's try to figure out the image. What we need is we need 2 rays of light. Of course, it's going to take billions of rays of light to transfer the information about point A to some new location, but we need 2 to figure out where that location will be. And so maybe there's a ray of light that comes in like that, reflects off of the tip, and then goes towards the lens, but in a way that is parallel to the central axis like this, right? So you'd have an arrow here and an arrow there. I'm going to get rid of that piece for clarity. So here's the ray of light, reflects off of the tip, goes to the right, goes through the lens, and then what does it do? It goes to the focal point. It goes to the focal point like this, and let's give it a direction, so it just goes out like that. Right, now I need a second ray of light, and I need to clever about this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a second ray of light in such a way that, let's say there's a ray of light such that it comes in and comes in like this, and then it reflects off of the tip of the arrow and then goes out like that. And you might wonder, why do I want it to go like that? Well, to be more precise, I want it to go like that. It's in a direction. I want it to go in a very specific direction, in a direction that it's as if it was coming from that focal point. So maybe I can draw it like this. I want this direction. I want that second ray of light to have the direction as if it was coming from the second focal point. Right? And so what I'm going to do here is, for the sake of clarity, I'm going to get rid of that. And instead, what I'm going to do here, I'm going to draw this ray of light going like that. Gets to the lens. And of course, I run out of lens here. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to cheat a little. I'm just going to extend the lens. There we go. Great. Nice. There we have a longer lens now. So this ray hits the lens and then it changes the direction through the process of refraction and goes in the direction that is parallel to the central axis. You might wonder why. Well, if you were to flip the direction and go backwards, let's say that ray of light comes in like that, hits the lens, where will it go? To this focal point. And so now I'm going to actually indicate that that's the case. So you do this little extension here. It's as if it was coming from that focal point. All right. Well, what did we get? We didn't get anything really yet, except that, let's say that you put in a previous example, your eye was sitting right here, right? And this is your eye, and all of the rays of light with all the information are coming towards your eye at this focal here, at this, not focal point, but at this point here, the green point. Well, this time your eye sits here in this picture, and it's receiving these. This is your eye, and your eye is receiving these 2 rays of light, this one and this one. But how do you make sense out of it? Well, what you do is you draw an extension of this. See, this ray of light is coming in towards you. You don't really know where it's coming from. Your brain is going to make an assumption that this thing just comes from behind the lens. So let's run the extension here. Likewise, this ray of light is coming towards you. Your brain will doesn't know where it's coming from. It just knows general direction. So your brain can determine that this information is coming from that direction, but it doesn't know that it's changed its path. However, note that there's a point where the two rays of light will cross. Not the rays of light, but their extensions. So there's a point here where the two extensions will cross. And if you were to draw more of these rays of light, you would then notice that, let's say you have a ray of light that goes like this, and then it changes its direction. So it would change its direction in just such a way, still come towards you. But if you were to make the extension, that extension would actually go out to the green point here. Likewise, if you were to draw another one that goes like this, and this would change its direction, go towards your eye in just such a way that if you were to run the extension of that ray, it would go through the green point again, and so on. And so now let's maybe do one more like this. Goes here towards your eye. If you were to run the extension of this one, you would find out that it also goes through the green point. And so now your brain will think that all of this information is coming from this location here. And so your brain will reconstruct information about the original point A at this location. So here's point A. And the image that you will form within your brain will look like this. All right. So if you were to draw it in a quicker fashion, you would do something like this. Here's a diverging lens. Here's the central axis going through it. The object that you are interested in viewing would be somewhere here. And then the focal point would be, let's say here, it's 1f, equidistant to the lens is the other focal point here. And now let's draw rays of light. You need only two. I drew multiple in here just to explain how is it that the image actually is seen, but you need only two rays of light out of the billions available, and one of them is going to go reflect off of the tip of the arrow, go to, oh, I have to correct that. I drew the wrong lens. Look at that. Go back and redraw this lens. So we need a converging lens. I drew a diverging lens. Here's a converging lens, and let's put central axis here. Focal point. So here's a focal point. Somewhere far out, we want this focal point to be far out in order for this diagram to be clear enough. Here's the object, and now let's try again. So the rays of light that we need are two. One of them is parallel to the central axis, goes like that, and it goes through the focal point. And the other one of them is going like this. Well, but obviously it couldn't possibly do that, so it has to reflect off of the tip of the arrow and go towards the lens as if it was coming from that focal point on the left hand side, and then it just goes out parallel to the central axis. And now these are the directions of the rays, but if we run the extensions of these, first one, and run extension of the second one, wherever these extensions cross is where you would have the image. I'm going to put here image, and the black arrow is the object. All right, and of course this is the lens. So you could get two types of images with a diverging lens, with a converging lens. Both of these are converging lenses. In one case you get a flipped image. In another case, you do not get a flipped image. This image is not inverted. In this case, you get a magnified image. In this case, you could also get a magnified image. This is typically what you would think. This is a typical case of seeing things through a lens. That is, if you put your eye here in front of the lens, right? If you place your eye front of the lens here. If you're looking at the lens, if you're looking at a thing through the lens, then you will see its magnified image in this fashion. This is why you would see it magnified. But you could also project an image of an object on some screen. If you were to put a piece of paper here, you would see the image of the arrow. Or if you were to place your eye on this specific location, you would also see the image of the arrow. Now the difference between the two images is that this image here is real. It is an actual image formed by actual, real, physical rays of light. This image here is not real. It's a virtual image. It's a virtual image because there's really nothing there. These are just the extensions of the rays of light, and your brain is being tricked into thinking that the object is here, but there's really nothing there. So we call it the virtual image. Versus here, there's something actually physically present there. The rays of light that cross at this location. So this image is real. It's actually physically there. The object is here, but the image is physically there. In this case, the object is here, but there's really nothing at this location. Your brain is being tricked into thinking that there's something here. So we have the real image, we have the virtual image, and maybe what I'll add to it is that real image is formed by rays of light, and then a virtual image. So virtual image is not formed by it is formed by extensions, not by light. Right, so there's really nothing in here. Okay, so you have the two types of diagrams for the converging lens. I'm gonna do one more with it. I'm gonna do it like this, just to flip this whole, just to make one. I'm gonna do one that is tricky, I suppose. So here's the lens, and let's say here's the central axis. Now let's say that I have my object is here, and it is upside down like this. And then I have a focal point that is here. And the question is, where will the image be, and will it be virtual or real? The first thing I have to do is transfer the focal point to the other side, so it's equidistant. So here's the focal point. Now I need two rays of light that will cross somewhere, or perhaps extensions. So let's do the first one that reflects off of the tip of the arrow, and then it goes in the direction that is parallel to the central axis. And then what does it do? Well, it has to go through the focal point, so it goes through the focal point. And so that's one ray of light, goes out this way. Second ray of light will reflect off of the tip of the arrow, go through the focal point to the lens. And then what will it do? It will go in a direction that is parallel to the central axis. So it will go like that. So here's the second ray of light, and that's that. Wherever they cross is where I'm going to get my image. So the image would be right here. And this would be a real image because it is formed by actual rays of light. And that's that. And maybe I'll do, yeah, why not? So suppose that now I have, I'll do another one. Let's say that I have a converging lens that looks like this, and then let's give it central axis somewhere here, axis of symmetry, horizontal axis of symmetry. And I have an object that is like this. And now the focal point somewhere here, and the question is, where would the image be formed? So equidistance from the center of the lens would be somewhere here. Here's the focal point. What I need is two rays of light. One of them is reflects off of the tip of the arrow, goes to the lens, and I wanted this, goes to the lens, and then refracts through the lens and goes to the focal point. All right, let's give it the direction. So this is the direction it would take, and the second ray of light would would reflect off of this point here, tip of the arrow, and then it would go towards the lens as if it was coming from the focal point, the other focal point. So we have to extend the lens a little, I guess, again. So let's try that. good enough. And now let's draw a ray of light that goes like this, refracts, and it just goes out horizontally afterwards. So we have an arrow that points in this direction, and if this ray of light here is parallel, then just traced backwards, goes parallel, goes through this, must go through the focal point. Right, so you want to make sure that this line here goes through the focal point and then goes out that way. Now what you do is you extend these, so you extend the tab, you extend this, and wherever they cross is where you would have the image being formed, so the image would be like this. Change the color, here's the image, and this would be a virtual image. Virtual image because there's really nothing here. It's just a trick. That is, if your eye sits at this location, then it thinks that the information is coming from here. But there's really no information coming from here. You're being tricked. Versus on the other side, if you put your eye right here in this location, if you put your eye right here in this location, you will see the actual image. Okay, so this does it for drawing the diagrams for the converging lens.